How concerned are you about the Avs? Like, look at, they lost to Florida the other day. Florida hasn't been playing overly great. They lost to the Canucks recently. They lost to Arizona. They got spanked by Toronto, lost to LA, lost to Vegas. They did have the one win in overtime against Edmonton. But, like, this is the defending Stanley Cup champions. And even with the injuries, they still got some pretty elite players. Are you surprised that the struggles of the Avs have extended this long?
I am, and I take my cue from their coach and Jared Bednar, who last week, what he said to me was incredibly eyebrow raising. He said, I hope we're not relying on the success of last year to think that that's going to, I'm paraphrasing, going to carry us through and just magically get us into the playoffs this year. That even with the injuries, that all of a sudden everyone's just going to jump back on board and it's going to be some magic carpet ride to the top of the Central Division standings. Like, that doesn't happen. And the fact that he voiced it publicly, like, here's the other part about the injuries. Yeah, they've been asking their players, their stars, to do a lot that have been there. Cale Makar and what he's shouldered this year, 3 consecutive games this week with 30 plus minutes. He hasn't had the same point production because he can't expend himself the way that he used to. He needs to be efficient because he's out there so much and is doing so much that this isn't new, these injuries. Like, they've lingered since October, November. Like, to think that, the Avs have been shorthanded all season long and yet this is still an issue. Maybe they're running out of gas because they've been asked to do so much. But when he said that, I was like, ooh, that to me was a big red flag.
Well, and I know people always talk about, well, the Avs have games in hand. It's true they have games in hand, but when you have 4 or 5 games in hand, and now we're into the second half of the season, yeah, you play those games, but you're going to be playing them in a more of a condensed time frame. So it helps you in one essence, but it also means you're going to be playing more games in a short period of time. So the fatigue factor that potentially is already there for your elite players might be heightened because now you're playing more 3s and 4s in back-to-back games over the next while. And that, they obviously really need Manson and Bo Byron. That's their second pair. And that's been crushed. And I think they have. I still believe even without Landeskog and Nichushkin, which are 2 big losses, that they still have enough offense. I really think they missed that pair. And the fact that those 2 are the closest to returning, that's probably a good sign for Colorado. But they just lost to Chicago. Chicago had 10 wins, 10 going into last night, and they beat them in regulation. And
Chicago has wreaked havoc on the West wildcard this week. They had a big win over Calgary on Sunday. It's just wacky that the West wildcard is in Chicago's hands.
Yeah, no, it's funny. But then you look at Ottawa. Ottawa has been a really good team here for the last 2 months. That's not an easy game on Saturday. And then, Detroit, who knows? But you know what? We'll see. Then they got a quick 3 and 4 game road trip in Calgary, Vancouver, Seattle. And Seattle, we got to get to them in a second, just how ridiculous they're playing. Before those guys come back, because if they just start skating, Frank, that's still at least a week, right? If you just started skating, because there's a difference that they mean skating on their own for a few weeks and then they start skating with their teammates. Well, that means they could maybe be a few days away.